For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. This man right here is one of the most legendary announcers in the history of American sports, and maybe in the history of sports, period. This is Vin Scully, and no one's got a bad thing to say about the man, as he's been the consummate professional throughout his entire career. He was the voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers for roughly half of the franchise's existence, which is impressive, seeing as the franchise has been around in some capacity since 1883, and when he passed away in August of 2022, his death was mourned by everyone, because anyone who has ever dreamed of being a broadcaster looked up to Scully. He's produced some of the most iconic calls in baseball history. He's been the voice of multiple generations, and there are tons of Dodger fans who grew up listening to Scully, and when they died, Scully was still the voice of the team, to the point where a good chunk of Dodger fans didn't know of a world without Scully on the mic. And on top of being a great baseball announcer, Scully was also incredible at calling football games, as he worked with the NFL on CBS for a large period of time, calling some of the best games that the NFL had. Even when he was dealt a crappy hand with some of his color commentators, like what happened with Alex Hawkins at the NFC Championship, in a debacle that you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, Scully was incredible, and embodied some of the rules of broadcasting that some could take cues from today, such as letting the moment speak for itself and creating poetry with your words. Long story short, everyone loves Vin Scully. And if you love Vin Scully and love crazy broadcasting stories like the one we're about to talk about today, then be sure to hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. We post every single day about the crazy history of the NFL, especially on the broadcasting side. So if you like that sort of stuff, be sure to stick around and help us reach 60,000 subscribers and build the best football community on this platform. Thanks for your support. However, nobody's perfect. Everybody has mistakes and moments that they would want to take back. And look, Scully was broadcasting games at the professional level from 1950 until 2016. He was broadcasting games longer than a lot of people were alive. When you broadcast games for 7 decades, and you broadcast games from the time the Korean War started until the time Pokemon Go was launched, you're going to make some mistakes and have some moments that you regret. And this one from his final season calling the NFL on CBS in 1981 was probably the one that he would want to take back, and it deserves a deep dive today. Because one of the golden rules of broadcasting is that you are not a doctor. You are not a medical professional. You do not speculate on injuries, and you do not report on the facts until you know for sure that it's true. And let's just say that Vin Scully, of all people, did not follow that rule during one game in 1981 between the Los Angeles Rams and the Atlanta Falcons, and it sent NFL fans into a panic and drew a ton of criticism from the public. Because this is the story behind what has to be, from an NFL perspective at least, the worst moment of Vin Scully's entire broadcasting career. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, and how Vin Scully of all people ended up with egg on his face, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand that Scully was calling, and how the game was going. It's October 11th, 1981. It's week 6 of the NFL season, and we've got a big NFC West game on our hands over at Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, between the Los Angeles Rams and the Atlanta Falcons. Anytime you've got a CBS game with Vin Scully on the call, considering the fact that he was one of the top 2 play-by-play men on the network, you knew that it was a big game, and this was a big one. Last season, both the Falcons and Rams made it to the playoffs, and I talked about the regular season series between the teams and how they split it. If you want to learn more about the first game, which the Falcons won thanks to one of the dumbest decisions of the entire 1980 season, click the card in the upper right corner. And if you want to learn more about the second game on the final week of the season, which the Rams won on a walk-off field goal, click the card in the upper right corner. Both the Falcons and Rams are off to solid starts in 1981, with both teams finding themselves at 3-2 through 5 weeks, tied with the San Francisco 49ers for the NFC West lead. The winner of this game takes first place in the division for the moment and owns the head-to-head tiebreaker, so there was a lot on the line to say the least. As for how the game turned out, this was a back-and-forth affair for the ages, where the Rams won the game on a 25-yard field goal by Frank Corral with 24 seconds left. Los Angeles took this one by a final score of 37-35, going on the road and putting the wheels in motion for what would be an Atlanta tailspin to end the season, seeing as the Falcons started 3-0 and ended it by losing 9 of their final 13 games. Despite the fact that the Falcons led the game 35-27 at one point late in the fourth quarter, which was a 2-score game back then because there was no 2-point conversion in 1981, the Rams came back and scored the final 10 points of the contest, in a collapse that would be embarrassing for most teams, but probably doesn't even crack the top 25 collapses in Falcon history, all things considered. It doesn't help when the Rams are able to return not 1, but 2 punts for a touchdown, with Leroy Irvin, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, feasting on Atlanta's punt coverage unit all game long, en route to an AP first-team All-Pro appearance. Irvin actually set the NFL record in this game for most punt return yards, when he had 207, and to this day, more than 40 years later, this remains a record that might never be topped, considering the fact that no one since Irvin has even topped 200 yards. All in all, this was one of the most exciting games of the 1981 season, and considering the fact that this was the national 1 o'clock game, the country got an absolute treat. However, besides the back-and-forth nature of the game, besides the crazy finish, and besides Irvin's incredible returns on special teams, this game is also known for this play at the end of the first half. Late in the first half, with the Rams trailing 21-13 and trying to push the ball downfield to get a score and cut into the deficit, starting quarterback Pat Hayden launched an absolute bomb down the sideline to Preston Denard, which was hauled in for a gain of 35 yards. Hayden did not have a great game at quarterback. Prior to that play, he was just 2 for 9 with 7 net passing yards and 2 sacks taken. But that throw was incredible. Denard hauled it in, and the Rams had the ball in the red zone. That was the good news. The bad news? Hayden took an absolute shot here. Wilson Famina, the Falcons defensive lineman and first-round pick of the 1977 NFL Draft, hit Hayden low and late and folded him up. Based on Hayden's reaction immediately after the shot, and based on how long he was down on the ground, I think everyone felt that this was not good, and that Hayden was going to be banged up. At a bare minimum, in the absolute best-case scenario, he would miss the rest of the game. And in the absolute worst-case scenario, he would never be able to play football again. To the surprise of no one, Hayden had to leave the game, and was replaced by Jeff Rutledge the rest of the way, who played way better than Hayden did, and helped guide the Rams to their eventual victory. Now, the injury looked absolutely terrible. When the leg goes like that, it is never a good thing. The human body is not supposed to bend and fold in that direction. There's a reason that the NFL banned hits like that in the wake of Tom Brady's injury on opening day of the 2008 season. And in many ways, considering how bad the hit was, and considering the fact that Hayden was hit after he launched the ball, and the defender didn't even begin his launch until after Hayden threw it, it's remarkable that this was not called roughing the passer. Even by 1981 standards, when defenses could get away with a lot more, this was called roughing more often than not, and the referees missed it. And when you see your quarterback get injured like that, and get hit like that, you assume the absolute worst. It's going to be almost impossible to walk on your own power anytime soon, let alone play football and suit up in a contact sport and play at a high level. And when this man right here, Pat Hayden, got hurt, everyone had a feeling that it was serious. But Vin Scully, being the consummate professional that he was, and knowing how powerful his voice was, decided not to say anything. he refused to say that Hayden's leg was broken because he wasn't certain. Obviously, it didn't look good. But remember what I said earlier in the video. One of the rules of broadcasting is that you are not a doctor, and until you get confirmation, you do not say what a player's injury status is. You do not speculate. And remember that this was 1981, so there was no social media or internet to look up information quickly. Whatever Scully said, especially considering his reputation as a trustworthy source, and considering his platform, was taken as gospel, because you would have no reason to believe otherwise. So all that Scully said was that Hayden was hurt and that something happened with his lower body. And that's when things got incredibly hairy, because at that moment, Bob Stenner, the CBS producer, said that Hayden's leg was broken. He was imploring Scully to say that Hayden's leg was broken. And as a broadcaster, when the producer tells you to say something, usually you do it. Whether that's a particular stat that goes along with a graphic, a toss for an advertisement, or a toss to a silent reporter, or something along those lines. But still, Scully didn't say anything. He didn't know for himself whether or not Hayden's leg was broken, so he refused to bite the bullet and say so, even though Bob Stenner, his producer, was literally telling him that Hayden's leg was broken. So the two men were at odds. You had Scully, who refused to give out information that he couldn't verify for himself, and you had Stenner, who said that Scully needed to say this. We were into the third quarter, and Scully had yet to say anything about the injury status of this man right here, Pat Hayden, other than the fact that he was hurt and had been replaced by Jeff Rutledge. And then, Stenner came back with some more information to Scully. He said that it wasn't just him who said that the leg was broken. Stenner said that he had multiple sources confirm that it was a broken leg, and that something had fractured. Stenner got information from the team doctor of the Atlanta Falcons, he got confirmation from the publicity director of the Atlanta Falcons, and he got confirmation from the publicity director of the Los Angeles Rams. Notice one source we didn't hear in that, the team doctor for the Los Angeles Rams. Why the team doctor of the Falcons would know about Hayden's injury status, but not the doctor of the Rams, as in the team that Hayden played for, I'm not sure. But regardless, at this point, Scully was being implored to say that Hayden's leg was broken. Not only was his producer telling him to do it, but his producer was saying that he had 3 different sources confirm that the leg was broken, even though Scully had no way of knowing that Stenner spoke to these sources, and even though none of these sources were the big kahuna of the Rams team doctor himself. But at that point, Scully finally relented, and midway through the third quarter of the contest, Scully delivered the news. Pat Hayden's leg was broken.
This full house at Atlanta's Fulton County Stadium saw what certainly figures to be the biggest single play of the day late in the second quarter. Pat Hayden was scrambling. Joe Laughlin missed him. Wilson Firmino was chasing him. Hayden finally set, unloaded, and got rid of the ball. And you see Firmino was in the act of tackling. Well, when Hayden went down, the report we had, and we sure took our time before we gave it, but the report we had was that Pat had suffered a broken lower left leg, and he was taken off in an airbag.
Yeah, that was a lie. As you can probably expect based on how this video is going, turns out Pat Hayden's leg was not broken, and Vin Scully just scared the ever-loving crap out of every Rams fan listening, thinking that their starting quarterback would be done for the season. Turns out, it was just a contusion. It was only a bruise. 'Tis but a scratch. And the information that Scully got from Stenner? Yeah, that was also fake, because the public relations director of the Rams, Jerry Wilcox, said that the x-rays at halftime showed it was contusion of the lower left leg. No fracture. Obviously, it hurt. It didn't look good, and no one can deny that. But a bruise is a heck of a lot different than a broken leg. To show the difference in severity, literally the very next week, when the Los Angeles Rams played the Dallas Cowboys, the starting quarterback for the Rams was none other than Pat Hayden, as he was back out on the field under center 7 days later for Los Angeles. And afterwards, To say that people were fuming about this CBS broadcast and were furious at Vin Scully would be putting it lightly. People were criticizing Scully, and understandably so, for giving out false information, for scaring Rams fans into thinking that something was true when it wasn't, and for jumping the gun and not waiting for all the facts to come out. One writer even said in a review of the broadcast that Scully was not a popular football telecaster with Falcon fans, and he cited the Pat Hayden thing as an example. But the person most furious about this, the person most furious about the information with this man right here, Pat Hayden, and his injury, you guessed it, Vin Scully, who took time to call out everyone who fed him wrong information, and he called out his producer for forcing him to say this blatantly incorrect information. Now remember that by this point, the relationship between Scully and CBS was tumultuous, especially after Scully was passed up for the #1 play-by-play job for Pat Summerall, because the bosses thought, and correctly so, that Summerall would make an amazing pairing with John Madden. And this definitely added some fuel to the fire, because Scully said on this, to show you how bad the information was, and I don't want to name names in public print, we got one report that Hayden's leg was set on the field. I guess people get so anxious to provide information, they don't wait long enough. If it's not accurate, it's worthless. And when you're dealing with an injury, it has to be accurate. Some wise words to live by, especially in today's climate. When you're dealing with information, it has to be accurate. And Scully was fuming that the information he was basically forced to say on the air, because his producer was insistent that he do it, and was making up sources to get Scully to trust him on this, was wrong. As for what happened after the game between these two teams behind me right here, Vin Scully would work more games for the Rams in 1981, even despite that debacle. 2 weeks later, on October 25th, he was asked to call the game between the Los Angeles Rams and the San Francisco 49ers, which was taking place at the same exact time that the Los Angeles Dodgers were playing the New York Yankees in Game 5 of the 1981 World Series. Scully pulled the Kevin Harlan, and he ended up calling both games at the exact same time. And if you want to learn more about that, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Seems like a pretty easy way to get forgiven for your mistake, even if it wasn't exactly your mistake, all things considered. Oh, and for what it's worth, the producer that Scully had for that game, Bob Stenner, well, he worked games until 2014. He would be a producer for 50 years and would go unpunished for this incident. Whether he should have or not, you be the judge of that, but both Scully and Stenner made it out without any real punishment, even if their public perception did take somewhat of a hit. So what's the moral of the story involving what happened with this man right here, Vin Scully? Don't present facts as facts unless you know for certain that it's true. Unless you can verify it, wait to pass judgment. Especially in today's climate, where people like being first rather than being right, it can be easy to forget that. And CBS definitely forgot that in 1981, even though there was no incentive for them to rush the news, since people were going to watch the game regardless. They weren't going to turn it off, it was a great game. And there was no social media or sports news on or anything like that to beat them to the punch when they inevitably found out the truth. And odds are, if Vin Scully doesn't want to do something because he thinks it's unethical, he doesn't think it's right, and he isn't quite sure about it, odds are Vin Scully is right, and I'll trust his judgment when it comes to what to say and what not to say on the mic over just about everyone in this business. Because on October 11th, 1981, when it came to the injury to Pat Hayden, Vin Scully wanted nothing more than to stand pat on Pat. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.